Let's dive into this Dynasty Fantasy Football Rookie Mock Draft. We're doing the first round only. It is a 12-team Superflex Rookie Mock Draft. And this hypothetical league of ours is also tight end premium. So tight ends will get a little boost for every catch, which is relatively common in Dynasty leagues. So it should factor into your draft strategy if that is a type of league you play in. I have the first pick. So I will have picks 1, 4, 7, and 10. Jake has picks 2, 5, 8, and 11. And Braden has 3, 6, 9, and 12. Let's get things started at the 101, and that is going to be Jeremiah Love, a running back out of Notre Dame. I think he's the pretty clear 101 regardless of the format you're playing in this year. He's a projected early to mid first round pick at running back, which would be outstanding draft capital. I mean, that's right in the range of guys like Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, those types of guys. Back-to-back years at Notre Dame with 6.9 yards per carry, 35 touchdowns in the last 2 years as well. Also recorded 55 catches over that span, so he's certainly got receiving upside for fantasy. There's a few teams in that mid-round one range that I think would be outstanding landing spots. Those teams are the Chiefs, the Vikings, and the Cowboys. He declared early as a junior. He was the clear number one back for Notre Dame, despite having a projected top 100 pick behind him in Jadarian Price. Assuming he does not slide to day 2, which I would be shocked, I think this is a lock at the 101.
Yeah, so going off what you said before, Sam, I agree 100% that Jeremiah Love's got to be the 1-1 here. I mean, the play that sticks out in my mind is when Notre Dame played Penn State last year, that play where he got hit like 2 or 3 times behind the line and just surged forward for the touchdown, having like 4 dudes on his back. He's got a rare talent in combination of size, speed, and balance. I think he can play both the power running back game and he's got that explosive burst. Yeah, I mean, he's going to be a gem for whoever picks him. I mean, it's funny you say the Cowboys because I'm thinking, not a fan of he had a decent year. What's his face? Not Rico Dowdle. He's on the Carolina. Javonte. But yeah, I definitely do think they need a higher upside sort of play. Although, if I was a Cowboys fan, I'd probably be wanting some sort of defensive player, but if he's there, you got to take him, I think.
Yeah, I have little to add about Jeremiah Love. The one thing I will add is that he had the highest PFF grade in the country among running backs over the last 2 years, which includes Ashton Genty's ridiculous 2024 season. Regardless of the situation he goes to, he's going to be probably an RB1 this year as a rookie. And if he goes to maybe Minnesota or Washington or Tennessee, assuming the Titans upgrade the offensive line, I've seen all those as landing spots as well. He even has RB1 overall ceiling in 2026.
Jake, you are up here at the 102. Who'd you go with?
Yeah, so I know that most people are probably taking Jalen Tyson here, but I've been burned too many times by Ohio State wide receivers, so I'm just going to probably do the wrong thing, and I'm going to take Carnell Tate instead. Had 875 yards, 9 tutties, career almost 2,000. But, I mean, he's the classic Ohio State guy. He seems to always get open when you need him to get open. He plays a heck of a game. I mean, his last 3 games against Big Ten competition prior to the Big Ten title game, he had 111 yards against Wisconsin. I know they're Wisconsin. 124 yards against Penn State, and then 82 yards against Michigan. And he had 4 total touchdowns across that 3-game span. And then even against Indiana, he was the Buckeyes' sole touchdown in that game, going for only 45 yards, but I mean that Indiana team held him close. I think that kind of no matter where he lands, he's going to find a way to make a role. Sort of like early season Emeka Egbuka, although it does say something kind of scary that Emeka had that massive downturn later in the year and he couldn't seem to catch a ball no matter how close it was to his hands. But I think that Carnell Tate's just going to be a solid, steady guy. I mean, I don't think he's going to be wide receiver 1 on any team by any means. But, I mean, if he goes to, there's a tons. Imagine him on the Titans. He would be insane on the Titans. Or any other sort of wide receiver needy team. I think he has a lot of upside. On the Seahawks even, and with his running mate there at Jackson Smith and Jigba. There's a lot of good options, I think.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Egbuka because I wrote in my notes, I get a lot of Emeka Egbuka vibes from Carnell Tate's production, and part of it is scouting the helmet rather than the player, but both of them were wide receiver 2s throughout their career at Ohio State. And yeah, they're not generational prospects, like Marvin Harrison Jr. or Jeremiah Smith, but these are very solid wide receivers. Carnell Tate doesn't have the explosiveness where he's going to burn guys for long touchdowns, but is a great route runner and a contested catch artist. He does a lot of the short intermediate stuff that you love out of a wide receiver. So I think he has a very safe floor. Might not have the ceiling that a guy like Jordan Tyson or potentially even Mekhi Lemon has, but still a very good pick here at the 102.
Yeah, and that was going to be my point of the production doesn't jump off the page, but I mean, he still had over 100 catches the last 2 years and playing behind, a handful of round one NFL draft picks. So it doesn't wow you looking at his numbers, but he's a big body, he's got good speed, and he's going to go high in the draft. And when in doubt, drafting an Ohio State wide receiver is usually a safe thing to do. So I don't mind that pick at all at the 102. And then, Braden, you had the 103.
Yeah, I went with Jordan Tyson at the 103. Over his 3 college seasons, I guess it was technically 4, but did not record a reception in 2023. Got banged up by injuries in his first year at Arizona State. Had a solid season as a true freshman at Colorado, 470 yards and 4 touchdowns. Really broke onto the scene over the last 2 years. His junior season was definitely his best. Had 1,100 yards, 75 catches, and 10 touchdowns. Was a big factor in Arizona State winning the Big 12 title and making the college football playoff. This past year, dealt with some injuries. He had 61 catches, 711 yards, and 8 touchdowns. So a little bit of a downtick from 2024, but still a solid season overall. He's got a little bit quicker burst than Carnell Tate. So I think there's a reason to even potentially prefer him to Tate. They do tend to win the same way in that short to intermediate area. Tyson's also a little bit bigger at 6'2", 200 versus the 6'3", 195 for Carnell Tate. So not much, at least on the weight front, and he's an inch shorter, but very similar builds there. He does have some injury risk. I think Jordan Tyson does have a little bit lower floor than either of these other top receivers do. He tore his ACL at the end of his freshman year at Colorado, missed the Big 12 championship and the Peach Bowl last year with a broken collarbone, and then missed 3 games in 2025 with a hamstring injury. I still think he has a very high ceiling. To me, he's got the second highest ceiling in this draft class. If you're asking me, if I'm on a rebuilding team and I need to shoot for a cornerstone, which receiver am I taking? I'm taking Jordan Tyson before Carnell Tate or Mekhi Lemon. If it's a guy who I'm plugging in and playing as a flex option, I'm probably taking one of the other guys.
Yeah, and the only thing for me with Tyson is the injuries, like you said. But, I mean, outside of that, he's been a stud ever since he got to Arizona State. He had a mini breakout as a freshman, only 22 catches, but 470 yards and 4 touchdowns, averaging 21 and a half yards per catch. And if he stays healthy, 2 years ago, or I guess 3 years ago at this point in 2023, does what he does last year, he's probably a first-round pick last year. So seeing the production just be steady despite some injuries in 2025, I think this is another very, very safe pick, with the only concern being, like I said, staying on the field.
Yeah, nothing new to add there. Like you guys said, probably the highest upside wide receiver, but I went Tate over him just because, like I said, I've been burned too many times by Ohio State wide receivers.
And then I had the 104, and it's about time this guy went off the board. It's Fernando Mendoza, the Heisman winner and projected number 1 pick in the NFL draft. He is completing 73% of his passes, 41 touchdowns to just 6 interceptions. He has more passing touchdowns in the college football playoff thus far than incompletions. He has been ridiculous, and he's a virtual lock to go number 1 at this point. He's improved every year he's played in college, and assuming he goes number 1, he'll be a Raider. And I think if the Raiders opt to hang on to Geno Smith, that's honestly a good thing for Mendoza, because he can go the first few games, kind of sitting back, watching how the NFL operates, how it works, and all that stuff, and just give him time to learn and grow. But he's also probably NFL ready at this point from what we've been seeing. If he goes to the Raiders, assuming he does, he would also have Brock Bowers, Ashton Genty, and a young up-and-coming wide receiver core to work with. But either way, I mean, to get the Heisman winner and the number 1 pick at QB, 4th overall in a Superflex league would be, in my opinion, a great value.
Yeah, I mean, I love Fernando Mendoza, and I think the pick's pretty great. The only issue is if he does end up on the Raiders, his overall upside is limited by the fact that their wide receiver core is lacking. I mean, I don't really love Becht, I think his name is Jack Becht, and they traded away their other best wide receiver. I mean, however, Fernando Mendoza does seem smart enough to just feed the beast, and I think, assuming everything goes as planned, Brock Bowers is going to have potentially a generational season. I apologize, as my dog barks in the background. Um, so, I mean, we could be looking at crazy sort of tight end season from the third year Brock Bowers. And the other issue is, the Raiders do need to address that horrid offensive line. I mean, it's just terrible. So, I think that that's kind of limits his upside more than anything, but I like the pick nonetheless.
Yeah, I don't think if you're taking Mendoza in a rookie draft, you're probably not expecting him to be great in year one, at least from a fantasy perspective. I think his floor is below where, Carnell Tate and Jordan Tyson and Mekhi Lemon are, especially from fantasy perspective, because Mendoza is a capable rusher, but doesn't look to do it a ton. I've seen comparisons that range from Jared Goff to Justin Herbert on that. I think he's probably more towards the Herbert side, but even then, that's an extra 1 to 2 fantasy points per game tops. Depending on my team composition, there are some scenarios where I would consider taking him ahead of some of the top wide receivers. I've got one Superflex league, which is not tight end premium, where I picks 101 through 103. My only starting quarterbacks are Josh Allen and Sam Darnold. I've been toying with the idea of taking Mendoza and going Love, Mendoza, and then one of the receivers there. I think overall, I'm leaning towards the receivers. I do think Mendoza is going to be a good value down the line. Even if in year one his receiver core and offensive line aren't great, those are obviously things that the Raiders are going to address either through the draft or free agency. I think there's a lot of avenues for the situation around him to improve, so I'm not super scared off by his situation.
And yeah, just hitting on the rushing numbers really quick. If you exclude the sacks, it was 61 carries for 425 yards. So nothing spectacular by any means, but that's very efficient. And if he does something similar to that at the NFL level, you're going to be happy with it. But to move on, Jake, you are back at the 105.
Yeah, so in another world, this was going to be Dante Moore, and then things happened. I personally think he just doesn't want to be a Jet, which fair enough. So instead, I'm taking Mekhi Lemon here. I think this is probably like the no-brainer pick. One of the best wide receivers in the nation this year as a junior. He had 79 receptions for almost 1,200 yards, about 15 yards per catch. And then, 11 touchdowns, close to 100 yards a game. I mean, he's just everything you could want. He was basically USC's best player, I think, fairly certain. And I think he's just going to be a plug and play type of guy, and he's going to do great in the league right off the bat. I mean, he's 5'11", so he's not the biggest dude, but I don't really think you'd expect him to play on the outside as much. He's probably more of an inside type of guy. Quick and, I mean, great hands. So, I mean, can't really go wrong here.
Yeah, I'm a little bit concerned about his lack of top end speed, but it's a relatively mild concern. He's a great football player outside of that, and he's still at least in the solid to good department for speed. He's especially good after the catch, which is phenomenal for PPR. His size, speed, and play style, I think, gives him a higher floor and a lower ceiling than the other receivers in this class, at least at the top. I think in most kind of communities, Lemon has kind of consensusly risen into that top tier with Tate and Tyson. So if I'm going floors off of those three guys, I've got Lemon, Tate, Tyson. But if we're going ceilings, I've got Tyson, Tate, Lemon. Really, they're all interchangeable, and it depends on your team composition. So at the 105, Mekhi Lemon is an excellent pick.
Yeah, and he reminds me a lot of a former USC wide receiver, Amon-Ra St. Brown, because as you said, Jake, probably an inside slot guy at the NFL level. Doesn't have the elite speed, like you said, Braden, but just has everything you want to see production-wise at the college level. Broke out as a sophomore, had a monster junior year, is an early declaree. So I think, like you guys said, this is a very safe pick at the 105. He's my wide receiver too currently, pre-draft. I haven't really done a whole lot of scouting, but I love what I've seen on tape from Mekhi Lemon. He runs very crisp routes. So I think, like you guys said, at the 105, you're getting a very safe player who I've seen him in mock drafts going anywhere from like top 10 to late first round. quite honestly, I think late first round is probably better for fantasy purposes, just because he's going to have a better quarterback situation. I've seen a lot of the Bills scooping him up. I think that'd be great. Give Josh Allen a true wide receiver one. But either way, I think this is a very safe player at the NFL level. And Braden, I'll send things back to you for the 106.
At the 106, I'm grabbing another receiver here. It's Denzel Boston. His last 2 seasons at Washington have been nearly identical. In 2024, had 63 catches, 834 yards, and 9 touchdowns. This year had 62 catches, 881 yards, and 11 touchdowns. He's got great size at 6'4", 209. The one knock on him is that he hasn't really been a model of consistency. In Washington's bowl win over Boise State, had 6 catches for 126 yards and a score. Against Illinois, he went for 10, 153 and a touchdown. Against Washington State, went for 6, 107 yards and 2 touchdowns. Rutgers had 5 catches, 98 yards, 2 scores. But against some of the tougher comp, he's been a little bit struggling. Had 3 catches, 26 yards against Ohio State, 4 catches for 25 yards and 2 scores against Oregon this year. Last year against Indiana, had 4 catches for 43 yards, 2 for 35 yards against Penn State, and 3 for 43 yards against Oregon. I'm willing to take the chance on his ceiling here in the mid-first round. Additionally, the community seems to kind of be pushing Boston down the board a little bit. So I'd like him even more at the back end of the first round, but I think he's a fine pick here at the 106.
And yeah, just looking at his numbers, I mean, you can see that in 2022 and 2023, he only had a combined 7 catches. And that might be concerning at first thought, but keep in mind that in 2022 and 2023, Washington had 3 top 100 NFL draft picks at wide receiver. And then obviously once those guys were gone, immediately became the number 1 and broke out as a junior. So if he runs a good 40 at the combine, I think it's going to really help his draft stock because he's got the size at 6'4", 210, kind of like a Brian Thomas Jr. build. And ideally he'll play like rookie year Brian Thomas Jr. at the NFL level. But yeah, I think, assuming the measurables check out, this is going to be a probably late round 1 type of pick. And assuming that's the case, I think a mid first round draft pick in a rookie draft is perfectly fine.
Yeah, I just want to echo everything you guys are saying. Good player. And I also, to be fair on some of the production issues, it is Washington, and they just had moved to the Big Ten during his junior year, I believe. So that is kind of a stylistic difference from the Pac-12 and the numbers that those 3 top 100 guys were putting up. It's much more run-focused type of league. And the travel does wear on them. So I think that is something to consider when you're looking at these receivers on the West Coast of the Big Ten because, the travel can be kind of grueling. But I think probably would have made the exact same pick.
And then at the 107, I'm going to go with Oregon tight end Kenyon Sadiq. This is where tight end premium comes into play. It is usually pretty risky to draft a tight end this high in a rookie draft, but because there's a boost per catch, it makes more sense in this format. Sadiq had a respectable season in 2024, had 24 catches for 308 yards and a pair of touchdowns, but he was behind Terrence Ferguson, who wound up being a mid-round 2 draft pick to the Rams this past year. 2025, he had a much bigger role, 51 catches for 560 yards and 8 touchdowns. And I think if Oregon was healthier at wide receiver, his numbers could have been even better with less defensive attention being focused on him. He's got good size, good speed for a tight end. I think it was Mel Kiper Jr.'s big board had him inside the top 10 overall picks. I highly doubt he goes that high, but I think he's a safe mid to late round 1 draft pick. And assuming he doesn't slide to round 2, I have no problem taking him here in a tight end premium league.
Yeah, he was the best tight end this year, probably far and away. There were a couple other good tight ends, but yeah, great player. He was basically the only thing that Oregon had going for him in that game against Indiana. There was something to be said about the fact that they were on their 4th and 5th string running backs, and their wide receiver room's been banged up all year. But good blocker as well. But does everything you want from a tight end, and yeah, I think he projects well.
I think I might be a little bit lower on Sadiq than some people. I do like him still, but this price point's a little bit high for me. I'm a little bit concerned with his production down the stretch. Going through his last 4 games, we had Washington to close out the regular season, had 4 catches for 11 yards, and then in the college football playoff, 2 catches for 19 yards against James Madison, which I don't put a ton of stock into because Oregon was blowing out James Madison the entire way. 4 catches for 22 yards against Texas Tech, and then 5 catches for 29 yards against Indiana. And I would say you can kind of chalk some of that up to Dante Moore struggling over the last couple of games. But the Ducks' other tight end, Jamari Johnson, was excellent. Against Washington, he had 3 catches for 60 yards. Against James Madison, 1 catch, 41 yards, and a score. Against Texas Tech, 4 catches, 66 yards. And then against Indiana, Johnson had 4 catches, 83 yards, and a touchdown. Sadiq's overall season was still good enough to warrant consideration in the first round of rookie drafts, especially in tight end premium. But I need to see him get good draft capital before I can take him this high. To me, he's kind of a back end round 1 guy at this moment.
Let me ask you a follow-up on that. How much of the performance in the playoffs do you think lends itself to the fact that the Oregon Ducks have 2 really good tight ends, and the fact that he could have been a decoy for the production of the other tight end? Do you give any stock to that at all?
I think I could give some stock to it, especially in the Texas Tech game. I think you can kind of throw the James Madison game out the window for the most part.
Yeah.
But the Indiana game, I think you really needed him to produce at that point with how that game was going. And Indiana was able to shut him down pretty comfortably. So I think there's a little bit in play there, but I don't know. I think there's some to be a little bit concerned about.
Yeah, and if I'm not misremembering, they did have Pond on him a good amount, didn't they?
Yeah, I think a little bit. I think D'Angelo Pons was kind of bouncing around and just kind of covering basically everybody that game. He played a phenomenal game.
Well, I know he's an incredible player, but it does lend something to the fact that you can be so easily covered by a CB when you're supposed to be a tight end. But
right,
sorry.
And then Jake, I'll send it back to you. We had one Washington Husky already come off the board, and you went with another one.
I did. I'm going to go Jonah Coleman here. I'm not like in love with the pick, but I think that a lot of the sort of mid-round running backs are sort of interchangeable. I mean, there's obviously you have the top end guy with Love, and I know that a lot of people would probably go with the other Notre Dame running back here, and it's definitely possible that he's having a sort of overshadowed by the clear 1-1, and that secretly he's also a stud, and I'm once again making the wrong pick. But I mean, Coleman played well. He didn't do so good this year. He was dragged down a little bit, but last year he did have over 1,000 yards rushing, 5.5 yards an attempt, and 10 touchdowns. His touchdown numbers did go up this year, but he did see a decrease in overall production. I think he's a fine back, and he'll probably be a third round type of pick. And we do know we have seen these third round picks kind of break out recently. Bucky Irving was good. I'm sure that if I was a smarter guy, I'd have one from this past year that was also a third round pick that busted out. But I mean, I'd probably project him in the third or fourth round. These guys tend to get a lot of workload, especially like mid to late. Oh my gosh, the Arizona State boy. He was a third or fourth round pick, and he was like the Giants' best player for most of the time. So I don't think he's as good as Scattaboo, but you kind of get that sort of projection where he's going to get carries and carries his points.
Yeah, I think we'll see more clarity on the post Jeremiah Love RB picture as the draft gets a little bit closer. Right now, I would say that Coleman probably offers the highest floor out of everybody in that second tier. He's got a nice blend of upside in both the rushing and receiving game. Had 23 or more receptions in each of the 3 seasons he was a starting running back in college. I think there's maybe some other guys with higher ceilings. You mentioned Jadarian Price. I would say Darius Taylor, Mark Fletcher, and Damon Claiborne are another couple of guys who maybe have higher ceilings, but obviously those guys also have much lower floors. So I think it's a solid pick here at the 108. And obviously this draft is going to be outdated within a couple of months for the most part, especially at the back end of the first round. So for right now, I think this is a nice landing spot.
Yeah, I would agree. And, you mentioned Cam Scattaboo. I think he projects really well like Cam Scattaboo because he wasn't like overly efficient. He ran for 4.9 yards, ran for 5.5 yards per carry last year, but 31 catches this year is really, really good for a running back, had 11.4 yards per catch. And he's just a humongous human being. I guess humongous in the sense of he's big. He's only 5'9", but he's 5'9", 230 pounds. So he's a mini Pekka coming at you every single snap. And I think, there's a team that with that and with the receiving upside is going to take a chance on him day 2. So I like that pick at the 108. Braden, who'd you go with at the 109? Are you with us, Braden?
Yeah, I have too many tabs open, so it's taking a little bit to unmute. I went with KC Concepcion out of Texas A&M at the 109. I've been a big fan of him since his time at North Carolina State, and his lone year in the Lone Star State was his best. At North Carolina State, had a great year as a true freshman, 71 catches, 839 yards, and 10 touchdowns. Stats dipped a little bit last year, had just 460 yards and 6 scores. But this year, rebounded in a big way, had a career high in yardage with 919, had 9 touchdowns, also had 70 carries and 3 rushing touchdowns over his college career. Could be a nice jet sweep or gadget threat in the NFL. Additionally, he offers some explosiveness in the return game. We saw Chimere DK be like the wide receiver 1 when you factor in all-purpose yards. KC Concepcion had 2 punt return touchdowns this year. His size is a little bit of a concern at 5'11", 190, but his upside is very tantalizing. He's projected to go late first round or day 2 of the NFL draft. There's some great landing spot potential to a lot of very good teams, potentially Buffalo, Philly. Those are probably the 2 landing spots that I would like him the most in. So there's a lot of things to like about Concepcion, and I wouldn't be shocked if he rises even more as we get closer to the NFL draft.
Yeah, you mentioned the size. I mean, we've seen smaller wide receivers have huge roles in the NFL. So at 5'11", 190, I'm not overly concerned. I mean, he's really not much smaller than, I think Mekhi Lemon is the same height and 5 pounds heavier. So I'm not too concerned about the build holding up. But, I mean, you look at the production, and I mentioned with a guy like Mekhi Lemon, we saw the sophomore year breakout. KC Concepcion broke out immediately as a true freshman at the Power 4 level. I have very few concerns with him, and I think at the 109, assuming he goes late first, early second round, I think this is a fantastic pick.
Yeah, I agree entirely, and I would love for my Eagles to get a hold of him because I think that it's time to get rid of AJ Brown and start, rebuilding the wide receiver room. Although Tarleton State legend, I can't remember his name, but he was a dog. We had 1 catch in that playoff game. Let's go. That being said, yeah, you mentioned the size thing. I mean, obviously not the same player as my boy Smitty, resident Eagles fan here. But I mean, if he can do it, and I tell you what, he's about 175 pounds sopping wet, and he'd be taking hits like crazy. So if he can do it, I think 190s, 195, whatever you said it is probably fine. And I mean, you gotta have a gadget guy. A couple jet sweep type of plays, a couple reverses. I mean, that's probably why you don't want him on the Eagles. Probably a more creative mind, like throw him in with Kyle Shanahan, for instance, and you could have yourself, maybe you could have yourself a stew going.
Yeah, I like that fit now that you bring it up. At the 110, it's about time we had another quarterback go, even though it's going to be probably a pretty weak quarterback class. I'm going to go with Ty Simpson out of Alabama. I think he'll very, very likely be a first-round pick, and I think he'll probably even go top half of round 1. I'm confident he's going to go sooner than some people may think he will. Up until that first game against Oklahoma, I mean, he was the Heisman frontrunner and a possible first overall pick. November was certainly not his best month, and so he slipped a bit since then. But it's also important to keep in mind his situation this year. He was a first-year starter. He threw for just under 3,600 yards, 28 touchdowns to just 5 interceptions. There were some rumors/reports that came out in November that he suffered a back injury, and I don't know how serious or legit that was, but his pre-injury and post-injury numbers were drastically different. And then, of course, we saw it in the Rose Bowl game. He cracked a rib on a hit. Alabama had the 123rd ranked rushing offense this year. It was quite literally the worst rushing offense in the history of Alabama football. That is not an exaggeration either. His wide receiver 1 coming into the year, and Ryan Williams, was non-existent for the last 2 months of the season. He certainly does need to clean up some things, particularly the deep ball, and he needs to be better at throwing the ball away at times. But as somebody who, as an Alabama fan, watched every single snap this guy played this year, he can make every throw. He has the ability to make every single throw on the football field. I think he'll be a very solid NFL quarterback, and for fantasy purposes, he can run a little bit too. He doesn't run a ton, but he's got the speed to do it. So I think assuming he goes round 1, even if it's a weak quarterback class, I think late round 1 of a rookie draft is a fine spot.
I'm curious I don't love Ty Simpson. I don't hate him. I'm curious. You said you've watched every game. What's the sort of deal with the Ryan Williams disappearance? Do you attribute that more to Ryan Williams or Ty Simpson not finding him? I'm admittedly a Big Ten guy, so I didn't watch much Alabama this year.
I think it's a little bit of both because Ryan Williams was fantastic at the start of the year. And then I just think it came down to he didn't trust his hands because we saw him drop a ton of passes over the course of the year. That's been the biggest issue with him. And so I think it's been a little bit of Ryan Williams not trusting himself and the coaches not trusting him, as well as, Ty Simpson wanting to give his other guys the ball more. But yeah, I think it's a little bit of both, quite honestly.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. Not my only concern. My biggest concern is that you've got as your coach the sort of the quarterback guru in Kalen DeBoer, and if he's having this sort of up and down season, but like you mentioned, there might have been an injury with arguably the best QB reader in college. What does that say if he goes to a less than ideal sort of situation in the NFL? Who knows? I do think he is quarterback two, especially in a class this week. Um, and I mean, I can't really fault you for going for it. I'm not a Ty Simpson guy. I like him in the second round of the NFL draft, I should say.
Yeah, I'm more out on Simpson than I am in. There's a couple of factors going against him. First is that he couldn't beat out Jalen Milroe, who had some struggles of his own at Alabama. And Simpson also only had really one half of a good season during his 4 years in Tuscaloosa. And maybe that was some coaching stuff. I know, Sam, you were not happy with Ryan Grubb as the offensive coordinator this
Not
year.
at all.
But overall, I think Simpson has shown some pretty significant flaws as a prospect. His CFP game against Oklahoma was pretty good, but the rest of his second half of the year was pretty subpar. I've already talked about it when we did our college football playoff podcast about a month ago, so I won't rehash a lot of that stuff. But additionally, Simpson took a lot of sacks. He took 29 over the course of this year. And the question is more, is that on him or is that on the O-line? He does offer some rushing upside for fantasy football. When you exclude the sack yardage, was right around 300 yards. So that's 20 yards a game. It's a couple extra points. Maybe that pushes him up from, early round 2 of rookie mocks into late round 1. But for me, I just am not a huge fan of his game. And I don't know if he's going to be a guy who gets a second contract. And I get that these, back end of the first round guys aren't even rosterable in a couple of years, like half the time. I'm paraphrasing that from Dynasty Nerds, but I don't know. I'd rather take a guy who's maybe got a little bit better combination of floor and ceiling than Ty Simpson here.
And Jake, I'll send it back to you. You went with another quarterback.
Yeah, this is, to be clear, almost certainly the wrong pick. You probably want to take a wide receiver here, but I was feeling like a true sicko. And I personally do not like Carson Beck. I think that I don't like his face. I don't really like anything about him. But the fact of the matter is that he's a good quarterback, and I think that a lot of the reason he's getting sort of poo-pooed is the fact that he left Georgia. He had that really gruesome, I think, bicep injury, which I think you can tell has hampered his zip on the ball. He does tend to throw a couple of ducks. And there is also the fact that this Miami team does have a lot of talent, especially the wide receiver room number 10, I think it is an absolute stud. But, I mean, at the end of the day, he threw for, almost 3,600 yards, 29 TDs, only 11 interceptions. 29 touchdowns is top 10. He's top 10 in yards. Like I said, definitely a stud roster around him, but his 2 years starting at Georgia, once again, stud rosters. His first year, almost 4,000 yards, 24 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions. And then his last year at Georgia, almost 3,500 yards, 28 TDs, 12 interceptions. And the philosophy here is that I see he doesn't have the same sort of projection as Jackson Dart in terms of like athleticism and running. But he has the same sort of projection in terms of I think that a team is going to fall in love with a veteran guy that's played a lot of ball, um, that has shown that he can win, and I think that somebody's going to snatch him up. I think it wouldn't surprise me if he was the third quarterback uh, off the board. And I mean, I'm seeing it from the view of depending on your team, it's a super flex, so you're going to want another quarterback. And there's a dearth of good quarterbacks in the league right now. So, I mean, if Dylan Gabriel can get you snaps for half a season, I think that Carson Beck can do more than that.
Yeah, I'm not sold on Carson Beck at all as an NFL prospect. Similar to Ty Simpson for me, but for much different reasons. Unlike Simpson, Beck does at least offer the experience, but he's also shown a ton of inconsistency over his 3 years as a starter. I think it's fair to argue that he's regressed since his first year as a starting quarterback. Threw for just shy of 4,000 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 6 picks at Georgia in 2023. In 2024, his completion percentage cratered, dropped about 7.5%. The yardage dropped by almost 500 yards. He threw 4 more touchdowns, but doubled his interception total. And then this year was pretty good for most of the year, but he's had some inconsistency there as well. Had I think in the 2 losses Miami has this year, he's thrown a combined 7 interceptions. Has 11 on the year in total, 29 touchdowns. The completion percentage has rebounded. It's a career high 73.3% for him. But in his 2 CFP games against good defenses in Texas A&M and Ohio State, Miami has essentially taken the ball out of his hands whenever possible. He's combined for 46 passing attempts, 241 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. That's an average of 120.5 yards and 1 touchdown per game. And his touchdown against A&M was literally a touch pass to Malachi Toney, who did the entirety of the work on that play. I don't see an NFL team making Carson Beck a day 2 pick. To me, he's more in that Quinn Ewers mold, where maybe he gets some starts, but it's going to be as a day 3 guy, as a 6th or 7th round pick. And I think if you're not making him a day 2 pick, I can't justify taking him any higher than, I would say, the 3rd round of a rookie draft.
Yeah, and the concern with me about Carson Beck is if you go back to his time at Georgia and with Miami, every game that he's lost is because of him. And it's not like he hasn't had great pieces around him that have let him down. The game against Alabama a couple of years ago, I think he had 4 turnovers in that game. He had the 4 turnovers against, I think it was Louisville, and then 3 more against SMU this year. But I will say that this college football playoff has improved his stock pretty dramatically, I think. I don't think anybody saw Miami making this kind of run. I know we certainly didn't. But yeah, I think there's just too many red flags about Carson Beck to take him, early day 2. I think if he goes late day 2, okay, we can have a discussion about should he go round 1. But if I'm an NFL team, I'm probably using a day 3 pick if I'm taking Carson Beck.
If I may ask, what is your analysis on him compared to a guy like Shuck?
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
What's your analysis on him compared to a guy like Shuck, who's now starting for the Saints? Older player. I mean, Shuck definitely has better arm talent, so I'm not gonna.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, I wasn't super high on Tyler Shuck as a prospect either. Obviously, he balled out once he got the starting gig this year for New Orleans. I think what Shuck does is Carson Beck, but better in pretty much every area. You mentioned the arm talent's better. He's a better rusher. I think he's a better decision maker as well, even though he's also prone to some of those interception woes. He did a good job limiting that towards the back half of this year. But I know, like, when he first came in for Rattler in relief against, I forget who it was, but they were getting blown out by somebody. I think he threw 2 picks and lost a fumble in like a half of play. I don't know. I'm thinking, for me, you're at least banking on the upside of Shuck. I think he and Beck had similar floors as draft prospects. I don't think Beck has the upside that Tyler Shuck had.
Yeah, and quite frankly, I don't think the Saints should have taken Shuck that high. But if you look at the college production, Shuck did not have the turnover troubles that Carson Beck did. And, we've seen, especially now at the NFL level, Shuck has more of the rushing upside, which for fantasy purposes, like we're talking about, is, a much different story. But yeah, I think that's kind of where I differ the two. But Braden, I'll let you wrap us up. All right, go ahead, Jake.
No, I was just saying I can't argue. That's all fair. Good point.
But yeah, Braden, I'll let you bring us home here with the last pick of the first round.
With the last pick of the first round of this mock draft, I'm going to go with Jadarian Price, a second Notre Dame running back. He was a little bit overshadowed by Jeremiah Love at Notre Dame, but I think he's the second best running back in this draft class. Over his 3-year career at Notre Dame, his 4-year career, his last 3 seasons, he was pretty productive in all 3 of those. Not much of a receiving threat, but in the rushing game, put up some good numbers the last 2 years. 746 yards and 7 touchdowns in 2024, 674 yards and 11 touchdowns this year, averaging over 6 yards per carry in each of those campaigns. I've seen some comps like a Raheem Mostert for him, Bashal Tootin. Another guy that comes to mind for me is Jalen Wright, but better. A lot of these guys who have a lot of burst and are more of a low usage, high efficiency back at the NFL level. So I think the ceiling is there for Jadarian Price. Obviously, he has a very low floor. But for me, taking this guy at the back end of round 1, you're essentially taking a boomer bust guy. And I have a feeling that at the very least, Jadarian Price is not going to be a roster clogger in 2 to 3 years. He's either a guy who's going to be a stud or he's a complete zero, and you can cut him with no qualms whatsoever.
Yeah, and I think with Price, I mean, it's kind of I don't want to say a win-lose. I don't think that's the right phrasing, but we didn't get to see him with a super expanded workload, only 113 carries this year. Didn't get to see a whole lot of receiving production out of him, mainly because I think Jeremiah Love was just the better receiving back. So it made more sense to have him on the field. But the nice thing with Price is that he was very efficient the last couple of years, and he's not going to be coming into the NFL with a lot of tread on his tires. So I think, from a what can this guy do down the road perspective, that's a great thing. And so if he goes, round 3, I think that taking him late round 1 is totally fine.
Yeah, before you jump in here, Jake, the one thing I do want to add about the tread on the tires is I think it's a great point, but the last guy I said that about was Roschon Johnson, and he has been absolutely nothing at the NFL level. So I did not put that in my notes for a reason.
Yeah, and also I think that there are a lot of teams. I think all of your points are very good. The fact that also he's likely been overshadowed by a stud back at Notre Dame, so he probably does have a little bit more in the tank than he's even showing. And there's a lot of teams in that need that sort of home run hitter, that sort of second back. That's not going to be your every down sort of back. I mean, one that just pops into mind right now is the Houston Texans. Woody Marks is like a fine down to down back, but I'm not really riding on him to go crazy. Obviously, the Texans' offensive line is another issue, but you pair him with another bruiser sort of player, and I think that you could have yourself a lot of home run potential.